Hello, we are in round 12 of the Women's Candidates Tournament in Toronto, Canada. We are almost on the final stretch of this marathon of a tournament of 14 rounds, which will determine who is going to challenge Zhu Wenjun for the Women World Chess Champion title, a title she's held for 6 years. So let's see who will be the contender. In this game, we have Nurgyul Salimova against Tan Zhongyi. After a couple of losses in the last 2 rounds, Nurgyul is in last place at the moment in the tournament, facing one of the two favorites and former world champion Tan Zhongyi, who will definitely be playing for the win, since first place is what really matters to her. Let's dive into the game. We have King's Indian attack from Nurgyul, and whilst I'm not going to go into the details of this opening, it is a great opening to learn. If you're playing chess, if you're playing more like fun, fast, rapid and blitz chess, King's Indian attack, have a look at it. It's not something super common at the highest level of play, but it's a very solid opening that gives white a very solid structure that cannot be quickly exploited, and that will give you an attack on the king side later in the game if you want. And whilst I'm saying it's not super popular, there are games that even Magnus Carlsen or someone like Anish Giri or Gyuschuk has played with this opening, so definitely solid and interesting start from Nurgyul. Also good about this opening is even if the queens get exchanged, it's not a dead draw like something like the Berlin, which is much more drawish after the queens go. So the queens indeed go in this game on moves 8 and 9, and we have continued development from both players. After a serious thought here, Nurgyul played knight to a3 with the idea of later reverting that knight to the center to c2. So this typically knight goes here, but instead we have a maneuver from Nurgyul that will allow knight to go to a more natural square for this type of attack. So knight to a3 and development continues. What we've got here is, as you can see, the position looks quite blocked and there isn't any obvious threats at the moment, but what white really wants to do in King's Indian attack, if they haven't started with e4, is to play it when the time is right, which is, according to this type of attack, and this is a move that the computer definitely likes, e4 to play now. So at some point after you've developed solidly, you want to break in the center. We've got e4 and threatening e5, which will fork the pieces. So we have taking by Tan Zhongyi, and a second e4. D takes e4, so the pawn is still on e4. It is still a strong pawn supported by the bishop, and as you can see, whilst the position is relatively equal, white has a small advantage. You'd much rather play as white because many of your moves are good moves, whereas for black you need to find really precise moves since you're not very developed yet. Definitely white has more space and more scope for its powerful pieces at the moment, which will soon, hopefully, turn into a very interesting middle game with winning chances for white. We've got, of course, retreat the bishop so that it doesn't get attacked together with the knight in a fork, and further development from both sides where the plans start crystallizing and Nurgyul will prepare to launch an attack on the king side. On the other side, we see that black has very developed rooks, so let's see what happens and when the first tough choices for black will happen. Here Tan Zhongyi played a so-called anti-positional move, I guess. It probably would be better to first exchange the rooks on the d file in order to limit some of the attacking chances for white. Instead, she decided to kick out the knight, which is not the best move because anyways this knight can go to a really nice square for it. Knight to e4, and after that basically Nurgyul will keep going towards the attack. Nurgyul instead takes, so she exchanges knights. Not the worst move in the world, she still has a decent advantage and now manages to plant her knight on d6. Something that Tan Zhongyi wanted to do here is develop a pawn controlling further the c4 square, which is not a good idea. This is actually a blunder, and if you look at why it is a blunder, is whilst this development on the queen side has been happening, this knight has actually, by the moves of other pieces, been very restricted. So this can be really exploited, and let's see how it's going to happen. First we have exchange, taking the pawns first, with the pawn first at c6, and attacking the rook, which moves. Now we have h3, which kicks out the knight to a very unpleasant square, knight h6. So soon this knight has nowhere to go at the moment. These are blocked, and of course it was just kicked out of g4, so the only square that it might have to move later too if attacked is f5, but let's see what happens in the game and whether Nurgyul is going to manage to trap this knight, which will be a long-term weakness for black. I have king to f2, and as the queens are off the board, you can develop your king, and we have a further few moves. Notice that also the development of black is bad because the pawn on h5 is really weak, so it gets attacked and now it needs to move forward, which is not the best move. Actually, computer prefers if you do something else, like this pawn is not your concern to defend because there is bigger fish to fry in this position, like maybe exchanging the knight here, which is very powerful and has a lot of scope, or maybe attacking the rook and opening your bishop to be more attacking. But instead Tan responds to the immediate threat of losing the pawn by playing h4, and now this is a very, very bad move because it allows g4, something that white is craving to play but was not able to until the pawn was on h5. So of course we have, well, first we have f5, but the idea after f5 is to play g4. So now, as you can see, things are starting to look really dire for this knight. How to save it? There is, I guess, one good way to save it at the moment, which is to open some square for it, and that's what Tan does by playing g6. So the knight can escape when attacked. However, as you can see, Nurgyul is in a very winning position, and the next moves just show her mastery in the middle game of maintaining this super high pressure on Tan Zhongyi. But how is she going to convert? Let's see what happens in the game. We've got knight going to e4. Again, this is a good square for the knight. And after an exchange of rooks, we have knight to c5, another very strong outpost. It cannot be dislodged out of it because there is no pawns. So a very strong place to put the knight. We have further exchanges, and whilst there is not a lot of pieces on the board, the pressure on black is very high. Notice what just happened with this move b3, attacking the bishop. The bishop has nowhere to go. Here it would be taken, of course. Here it would be taken, so no good places to put this bishop. So it has to go back to f7 after being attacked by the pawn that's guarded by the knight. And f7 is not a good square because, as we remember, it blocks the knight from escaping. So how to set it up? Of course, you can't play g5 yet because the knight would take the pawn on f5 and escape and win a pawn. So of course, for Nurgyul, the next logical move is to add extra protection to the pawn with bishop to e4, which has other important ideas as well. Bishop moves to quite a sad place for a bishop, which is e8, limiting severely its scope, but it has to move in order to make space for the knight. And we have got g5, which is great for Nurgyul. She has made time control, which is important. She was a bit of time trouble before, but now got 30 extra minutes on the previous move. And we have knight to f7. So now things are not looking good for black at all, because after this move bishop to d5, we have a pin. So the knight cannot move. So if black does a random move, g6 is coming, pinning the knight and basically winning a piece. So things are looking not pleasant at all for Tan Zhongyi. She has to move the king in order to free the knight to move. Both moves don't look very good, and as you can see, the evaluation is over +5 for Nurgyul. And we've got king to h8. So now the best move in the position is g6. Because after the knight goes to not many places where it can go, the attack just becomes really, really strong. It can go to d6, to d8 maybe, but basically it's delaying the inevitable, because all of Nurgyul's pieces can start getting close to the king and create real damage, you know. So at the moment, white is really converting this advantage that Nurgyul started having over 10 moves ago. But after a long thought, Nurgyul played a move that just wastes a lot of the advantage. Instead of playing g6, which has more concrete, I guess, immediate winnings, she played f6. Still, this gives her a lot of advantage, but I didn't understand the idea behind it. So I would love to know what she was thinking with that move and why it would be better than g6, which just comes more natural with the type of attack that she's made. After exchanging the pawns, the rook needs to move because it's attacked, and it goes to c7. And now comes a very interesting position, and I'm sorry, like, feel free to skip because it's going to be a long tangent of an explanation what I'll do next. But as I was watching the game live, there was discussion in the chat, and someone really hated the next move of Nurgyul, whereas I thought that is the best move during the game. It's not a move that I would have found. I was obviously looking at lines with the computer, and the computer thinks it's the best move. So what I'm not saying is like I'm some sort of genius of thinking that it's the best move. No, I knew because computer likes it more than anyone else, but it's important to understand why computers like a move. Because the argument with someone in the audience was that it's just a bad move that's going to lose the game, that's going to waste Nurgyul's advantage, etc. And I really want to explain in this particular situation why a move like king to f2, which is what Nurgyul played, is the best move. What does it achieve, and why is it superior to other moves? Well, so one of the important things in this position that's good for white, and remember you've lost this huge part of your advantage, but you still have an advantage, is the king is on h8, so it's not really in the game, and allowing it to come to the game will really put in danger one of the best weapons for white, which is the pawn on f6. So you need to do something to prevent it. That's one of the major things that you can do as white. So one way to do it is to come with the rook here in 2 moves, presumably in the middle of those moves. Well, almost whatever you play, unless it's some direct threat or you take a piece. The next move for black would be this, in order to attack the pawn and to activate the king. So you need to deal with that. So king f2 allows you to put the rook on g1, but why is it better than going rook e4, which challenges, for example, a pawn and challenges g4 as a square? The reason that, at least I think, makes sense is your king will be here instead of where it currently is on g2. So being on f2 is closer to where you're going to need the king in the future. You want the king to start picking up pawns in the endgame. So you are winning a tempo by not doing 2 moves with the rook and not none with the king, staying quite passive and safe, away from the action, let's say. So you only achieve this with 1 move and your king will be closer. But then, if that's your logic, you need to consider why not play then king to f3. Already, that's better than the earlier move that we considered, rook to e4, but between f3 and f2, it makes more sense, logically, to play it on f3, because it's closer to the center, and you're getting closer to the e5 pawn, which is something you want to take. So, I think that the main reason why king f3 would be a worse move is that black can play, of course, king h7, and after you go rook g1, what black might be able to do with king f3 is play bishop to c6, right? Which pins your bishop to the king. So black will gain maybe not a full tempo, but somewhat of time to develop, because you need to deal with the fact that your bishop is not mobile, and then black can hatch a plan to exploit that or exchange bishops, because if the bishop is pinned and if black decides exchanging is good for them, it gives them the option to take your bishop for their bishop. And currently, which bishop is better? The white bishop, because it's in the middle of the board, it's attacking something, black bishop's not doing anything. So with king f2, you don't allow the white bishop to be a threat right away. Whereas the person I was arguing with about that pointed out that it just puts the king in danger, which later might be a problem for Nurgyul. But with the amount of white activity and the amount of black pieces that are not active, in my opinion, absolutely the best move. Nothing dangerous of the king to receive a few checks. Like, your position is not going to fall apart. Unlike the previous game with Vaishali, here even if Nurgyul makes mistakes, they're not mistakes that swing from win to loss. They're going to be mistakes that, hopefully not, but let's see what happens, will swing from winning a position to drawing the endgame. So, king to f2, best move, and of course I would love to hear from the guy that we spent 20 minutes discussing this move with in the comments. But anyways, king to f2, and we have a5. So Tan Zhongyi plays a move that gives a chance for Nurgyul to attack. You need to bring up the rook in the game, which she does via rook to e4. Now rook to e4 makes more sense than rook to g1, because last move of Tan was not king to h7, which was the best move. So Nurgyul still has an extra move to become more attacking before needing to seal off this line. So we have rook to e4, and after takes, Nurgyul gives a check, and now checks the king back into h8. So she's won a pawn, and she has cut off the king. So things are going very well for her. Now what we need to do is convert the game. So, in terms of material, things are equal. Everyone has a pair of rooks, pair of bishops, pair of knights, 3 pawns each. But white is in much better position. First of all, you can capture this pawn. Second of all, white's pawn is more advanced, and also black's pieces are kind of like very much on the defense. So what we need here is to hatch some attacking plans. For example, bishop to e4 can be played in the game. You can first capture the pawn, but capturing is not the significant part of this move. The significant part is defending the bishop, which is under attack, and allowing yourself to jump to further squares. So capturing is the best move. Or you can give a check and reroute, but basically knight to b4 is screaming to be played here. There is nothing dangerous about this move, and Nurgyul has found so many important difficult moves in the game, so surely she's going to play. No. So surely, unfortunately, Nurgyul played a move that speeds up the process of drawing. She exchanged the bishop for the knight, which gives her a lot less chances to win. Now this position is very defensible for black, so whilst black doesn't have a good attack, and whilst Nurgyul temporarily is up on, things start fizzling out. So unfortunately she hastened this move and exchanged, and now we have just a position that she'll need to even defend a little bit in order to prevent anything crazy happening on the b file and black getting a queen, which it does successfully. As you can see, there is no immediate threat of pawns advancing really far. Both players know how to defend these endgames. There is nothing that interesting in them to see, even though it looks a bit dangerous, the pawn being on b3. Pretty much every move draws in this position. This draws. After taking, the king will be able, with the help of the knight, to exchange 2 pawns. At the same time, white is going to lose its own 2 pawns. You can even play a funny move like rook to g4 to draw, because taking would be met with taking. So there is many things that you can do. You can put your rook here in order to discover attack later the pawn. But unfortunately, there is no way to win. After making the mistake of exchanging, Nurgyul did not go for the immediate obvious winnings. She wanted to keep more pieces on the board in order to create something, but gave up on these ideas in move 66 when she played f7, which forces exchanging, because you either have to take here or you have to take here, because obviously otherwise you'll be losing a piece. So we have rook takes knight, pawn takes bishop, turning into a queen. But now there is almost nothing that can be done, basically. Any 2 players probably would draw that position, and this is how the game ends. A draw for Nurgyul, quite disappointing from the point of view that she played an absolutely epic, super grandmaster, in my opinion, middle game, and created a position where one of the 2 favorites and ex-world champion was absolutely on the ropes, was so close to losing, but then decided to liquidate in a way that led to a very drawn position from which she couldn't get out. Now, it's important to note that whilst it looks simple in hindsight with computers, one of the problems that players have during the game is that Nurgyul does not know she's plus 5.6. She doesn't know she's plus 6.2 if she grabs that pawn instead of exchange the bishop. Because if someone told her, you're winning, only that, not even how, she will consider this a puzzle rather than a situation during the game, and really think until she solves it, which she'll be able to do. But since you're time bound, and since she was lower on time throughout the whole game, you cannot exhaust these positions 20, 30, 40 moves ahead, even in the end game, because time will run out. If you knew that you're winning, of course you would do it. But if you spend 20 minutes on something only to discover it's still a draw, it's better to play fast. And this is what saved Tan, that she played really fast, asked difficult questions to Nurgyul compared to her time left, and basically played like a champion. Like, she knew she's down, but she knew giving up is not a good idea in this position, because Nurgyul doesn't have an hour on the clock, she has 4 minutes. So calculations sometimes can go wrong, or just you have to play something in order to not lose. So this is it. Amazing middle game. Rather disappointing end result. But I'm sure that if before the game Nurgyul was asked, would you like a draw with Tan Zhongyi, she'll probably say, yeah, I'll settle for that. So onwards and upwards. Now Nurgyul is not last, which is nice. I still think that she played better and deserves more than 7th place in this tournament, but in any case, she's playing the best in the world. So scoring 4.5 out of 12 is not that bad. We've got 2 more games after a day of rest, so really excited how this whole journey will end. Thanks for staying with me. Let me know about this game, probably the most exciting game for Nurgyul in the tournament, in my opinion. In terms of middle game complexities, of course she won one and she nearly won against Vaishali. These were also good games with a lot of drama, but this one I thought was just the most solid and just shows that she has the ability to challenge the top in the next candidates. Thanks very much. Goodbye.